Knicks, Knicks and Bruises, we are back. Shout out to the chat. Yo, Black, it's time. Welcome to part two of the Expectations series, I guess. Right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Anybody who missed the Dope Soul Sports Talk earlier today, we was on the Queen's channel and we talked about the rising expectations of the Knicks. And we're gonna deep dive a little bit more with a different angle. I love, first of all, Peace Queen.
Peace.
Um, I love doing shows with you. It's crazy because we didn't talk all week, other than me telling you we got to push it back a little bit.
Right.
But we both had the same kind of thought process on what we wanted to talk about, from different angles. So it just
Yeah.
worked out perfectly.
That's
Um,
that chemistry. That's what's making me feel good about Mikal Bridges joining the team. You don't lose it. Once you get that chemistry, you don't lose it.
that's a fact. That's a fact. Even if you take a break, you know what I mean. Even if you ain't play together for a couple of years, it's still there. Um, but yeah, shout out to the chat. I was on Bleacher Report as always. You know, that's my daily source. You know what I mean, of updates on the league and in particular the Knicks. Just seeing what kind of articles they're talking about, who they talking about, what they're talking about. And a couple days ago, what caught my eye, they was talking about it's the title, Knicks players under the most pressure entering 2024-25. I'm like, interesting, good read. Let's see what this is about. And yeah, they talked about, the past 2 years, 97 wins between, the past 2 years, the rising expectations of the team last year and what we did,
Mhm.
then the addition of Mikal Bridges and the re-signing of OG. And they gave a list of three players that were their top three players under the most pressure right now for the Knicks. I'm gonna read the list. I'm not gonna give you the whys, the ins and out, but then I want to give my three, and then you give your three, or we take turns or whatever the case. But it was interesting. So their number one was Mikal Bridges,
Wow.
number one on their list. Obviously, we gave up the boatload of draft picks. The picks that we were holding on to get the superstar, whoever that may be, and then we end up, with Mikal Bridges. Maybe not the superstar name that we all thought about when we was talking about the draft picks, but
Mhm.
nonetheless, the Knicks went that route. I was one of the people that jumped out on a limb and said, "Hey, I think we should go after him." Even though I like Booker, I like Mitchell, and part of that reason was the fit. Um, Obviously, the Knicks feel that way. But yeah, 5 picks. That's a what I mean. That's a boatload, or,
Yeah.
or four in a swap, whatever it ends up being. It was a boatload. So they listed him at number one. I don't know if you want to talk about it, or let me go through their whole list and then we'll give ours. Number two on their list was Julius Randle. Um, I'm trying to see if I could just get a pointer of what they said, and
Mhm.
then we could give our own perspectives. Basically, they called it. It could be a make or break season for Randle, at least as far as the relationship with the Knicks is concerned.
Mhm.
That's how they ended it.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's context in there, but Randle was number two, and number three, which was shocking to me, was Mitchell Robinson. But the reasoning, ankle injuries wrecked Mitchell Robinson's 2024-25 season. Excuse me, I'm reading it. He went down early in December, didn't come back till March, and then obviously they cite his injuries throughout his Knick tenure as being the reasoning why. Um, I'm gonna start with, we're gonna critique their list and then we'll give our own. I'm gonna start with Mitchell Robinson, number one being three,
Mhm.
which I thought if he can be on the list, but at that number, at the third most, that doesn't make any sense to me. Um, I don't think there's pressure on him because it's injuries, right? That's nothing that he can control. He's not being reckless. He's not getting injured off the court and then not being able to play. Like, these are on court injuries. Pressure, I will put him very low on the list. Now, his importance to the Knicks
Mhm.
currently and moving forward is different. You know what I mean? But yeah, what's your thoughts on Robinson being 3 for them?
Yeah, I
Or
don't
what's
think.
your thoughts on a list in general?
Yeah, I don't see Robinson being 3, but Reggie Clark brought up a good point that he may want to shake his injury prone status and you know show he's up for a contract in a year or two as well. So, want to stay healthy for at least 2 years to show that, so I can see that. I still don't see him as number 3. Mikal Bridges, I don't see him definitely as number 1. And I get it. The Knicks um gave up a lot, but that was on the Knicks. Will he take that on and be like, oh, they gave up so much for me? I don't know. And the second one again was Randall. Um, I don't know about Randall being number 2. He might be, but I could definitely get why he's under some pressure. We talked about this,
Mhm.
off camera. He may think that, the team did well without me. The offense flowed a certain way. I don't want to mess it up. I want to come in and show that I can fit in and I can still be an asset. So maybe he's putting pressure on himself to fit in and show that he's an asset. Um, Maybe he does feel like he has to show the Nick organization that he's a fit as well, so that he can get the extension that he wants. Maybe. So yeah, I can see Randall being
On the
on the
list.
list and near the top of the list.
Okay. Um, Two things. You spoke about off camera, but you just mentioned it. Um, Randall, in the context of Randall putting pressure on himself.
Mhm.
So I forgot who you shouted out in the chat. Was it
Reggie
Reggie?
Clark,
Reggie
aka
Clark.
Gemini
Appreciate
1967.
appreciate you, Reggie. But yeah, that's a whole nother dynamic. And we could talk about this when we give our own top 3.
Mhm.
Pressure being put on yourself, external pressure, you know what I mean, pressure from expectation. Like there's all different types of places that the pressure can come from.
Right.
And by all means, let me also preference this by saying when we break this down, when we talk about this, it's not saying that the Knicks can't handle the pressure. You
Right.
know, there's pressure breaks pipes, but pressure makes diamonds, right?
Right.
So it depends on how you handle it
Right.
and what you can take and endure. But so yeah, that all being said, let's give your top 3. I'll give my top 3. You give your top 3, and then we'll see which ones are both on our list, and we'll talk about why we got them on the list.
Okay.
So number 1 for pressure for me, I'm gonna say it's not a player and it's the coach, right? Um, Now I get it. This is the first coach that's finished his tenure for where he signed his contract. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And actually got extended from his contract. Yes, you might say that alleviates pressure. Um, he's got all the players that he can ask for currently, right? This is currently the best team that he's had. He's always overachieved, if you will, right?
Mhm.
He squeezed everything he could get out, but it was with limited guys. Now you got everything you need. You got all the defense you need. The only thing I could argue, or he could argue, is that rim protection behind Mitchell Robinson. So God forbid anything happens to Mitchell Robinson. I think that alleviates some pressure from Tibbs because that's a staple in what he likes. But other than that, man, I think this is the best roster he's had as a Knick. You could argue this is the best roster he's had. You know what I mean? I know he had a prime Derrick Rose, and no, by no means is Brunson the same as a prime Derrick Rose, but Brunson has some intangibles that prime Derrick Rose didn't have, and
Yeah.
vice versa. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying they're the same player, but I think this is the best roster Tibbs has ever had. So with that being said, that's why I have him number one.
Are we just going down the list, or do you want me to?
I did it wrong. You can
Oh,
talk about what I said, and then you can give your number one, and then we'll go down the list if that
uh,
makes sense.
yeah, yeah. Tibbs is on my list. He's not number one though. But do you still want me to give my
Where do you have him? Three,
two?
two. Um, you can give your points that I didn't make as to why, and then you can go and give your number one, and then I'll give my number two.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah, I have Tibbs at number two as well. The pressure is on. Um, like you said, he has the roster now. Now, I'm not saying he has to win it in the very first year that he has, that he has the roster. Um, but I think the clock is ticking on whether or not he can lead this team to a championship. Um, yeah, he particularly if the team stays healthy, particularly if our top two players play up to their potential in Randall and Jalen Brunson. If that happens and they're healthy and they fall short, I think there's going to be pressure. Now, is it fireable pressure? I don't think so. Not in the first year, but I think there's pressure on Tom Thibodeau to show that he can get the most out of this team, that he could put the right rotations on the floor at the right time, that he can keep this team mentally ready and steady through the ups and downs of a season, and that the Knicks can get past the second round, um, if healthy. I think it's hard if the roster isn't healthy to say it's on Tibbs, but if this roster is healthy, absolutely. I think there's pressure on Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah, I mean, we preface this talking about expectations, and when expectations rise, I think automatically that more is expected of you.
Yeah.
So there's more pressure. So yeah, I mean I agree. Who'd you have at number one?
Number one for me is Brunson.
Mm.
Yeah.
The floor is yours, and
Oh,
I'll yeah, because I mean
okay.
I gave my number one, so
Okay.
yeah, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah.
Expound.
I think Brunson. The pressure's on Brunson to prove that he can be a number one on a championship contending team. The pressure is on Brunson to prove that he could be the head of the snake of a team that makes it further than the past 2 years to the Eastern Conference Finals, that he can raise his level of play as the lights become brighter as you move further on in the postseason. The lights become brighter. The microscope is brighter. The teams you're playing against are better. They usually have better rosters. Like everyone knows, for example, how to stop the Knicks, but do you have the roster to do it? And the further you go into the playoffs, the better teams you play, chances are they do have the roster to make it difficult for you. And can Brunson meet that challenge? Now, do I doubt it? I don't. I've seen him meet pretty much every challenge, but the pressure is on him to take the next step because you think about it. Tatum was good first, second round, but it's the Eastern Conference Finals is different. And we can go down the line of players throughout the NBA history who did well in the first and second round, but trying to get over that hump to the Eastern Conference Final, trying to get over the hump to get your team to the finals is not easy, And so I think the pressure is on him to show that he's able to do it. Now, particularly if you have the coach and you have the supporting cast. Like it's easy. It's harder to be like, well, yeah, but He didn't have a number two. He didn't really have wing players. He didn't really have nope, nope, nope. You got the coach. You got wing defenders. You got a secondary scorer, maybe even two in Mikal Bridges. I think the pressure is on Brunson. Can he be the head of the snake as we move further and further into the playoffs?
Mm. Um, let me give my 2 cents. Let me first tell you why I agree that um I mean, I don't know if I necessarily had Brunson in my top three, but I'm gonna tell you the reasons why I agree. You know what I mean. There's pressure on him.
Mhm.
Number one, like we brought all your guys here, right? Like
That yeah.
you know what I mean. Like Tibbs got his guys, and they happen to coincide with Brunson guys.
Mhm.
Um, um, and your performance. You know what I mean? You can't take a step back from what we've seen already of,
Right.
of what you're capable of, right?
With more attention. He's gonna get more attention too. Yeah.
But you also have more help, which
Yes.
which which, which
Yes.
was my next point. Like you did what you did without Randall. You did what you did without oh my god,
Mikal Bridges, OG,
Mikal.
he missed a
I
lot
don't
of
know why
games.
I'm trying to, you know what I mean? Like, but so yeah, we expect, like, we know what you're capable of. You can't move backwards. So yeah, expectation has risen. Um, and then this can go either way because this could be my argument on why there's less pressure on him, but this could also be my argument why there's pressure on him. But he's got the backing of the organization, right? He's got the not just the backing, but the push of
Mhm.
the organization, which we've never really seen before. Where you know what I mean? Like we talked about him making captain and whether or not it's a big deal or not, but however big a deal it is, truly, they definitely was out there trying to make it known how big a deal it is,
All right.
which has never been done from the Knicks side, and I don't recall it ever being done from just an NBA team perspective.
Right.
You know what I mean. Now, granted, I don't follow any other team, so maybe I missed it. But yeah, they was pushing that out there, and
Yeah.
and I talked about it a week ago or so, where maybe they're trying to boost his notoriety. You know what I mean? Boost his stardom to get him more known and more out there. From just not the regular casual or the regular Knicks fan. You know what I mean? So I get it, but yeah, that could add pressure, but internally that could also make him feel safe.
Mm.
Safe in the sense where all that noise, you know what I mean? None of that bothers him. It's just about work. And I think that's who he is anyway.
Right.
He's
Right.
what Clyde says, unfathomable. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So but I feel you. What do you say to people who say, him taking that the perspective of him leaving money on the table, buying him some grace, or even his previous performance. I'm looking at it like as an expectation, but his previous performance in the playoffs, buying him some grace. What do you think about that,
Um,
or alleviating some pressure?
it might be. It might be. I mean, one of the things I find, especially amongst the fans, is that if they like a player, they get a bit more grace than if they don't. If they don't like a player, they just laying low, waiting for something so they can spring out. I think Brunson has proven himself to the fans. So I think that if he gets off to a slow start, if he doesn't play well and the team struggles, I think the fans will give him a little bit of grace. I think if he doesn't play well in the playoffs, the Knicks lose in the second round again because Brunson doesn't show up the way we expect him to show up. I do think he's going to get some criticism from the fans, and I think it would be fair.
No doubt. Shout out to Sharice. I remember 60 wins on
Mhm.
the Dope Sports Channel.
Some fun.
Um, the pressure is on the coach. We're gonna make it to the Eastern Conference Finals with this roster we have. Um, What's your thoughts on that? And
Yeah.
I had
Go
another comment. I must have lost it. I'll try to find it. I gotta find. I gotta say my second. Who's number two for me? Um, Surprisingly, OG wasn't on that list, and I think OG has to be number two
ahead.
for me behind Tibbs. I mean, not just the highest paid on the Knicks. I think this is the highest contract ever for any Knick player, right? So yeah, like I mean, here's the thing: he can get by
Mm-hmm.
where he doesn't have to be. What's the game he got hurt in? Game four
I, I,
or game three?
I think it was three. I want to say three.
He don't have to be game three. Like that's not the expectation. Night in and night out, he can get by off of his defensive and his defensive alone if he's elevated to like a defensive player of the year type, you know, in that category, which I think he's capable of.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to be like the offensive spurt, but I think it's gonna have to be a mixture. It can't be just defense. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's gonna have to figure out. And again, this is not me. I'm just saying, like I know how the fan base is. I know how they've been in the past, and yeah, you making more than Brunson. You making more than Rand. Like you making more than everybody. You know what I mean? So if they gonna put the pressure on any Randall, Brunson, him, they gonna come to you as well. You know what I mean? And I know he has high expectations for himself. He wants to be he wants to be more of an offensive player. He's stated that in Toronto. Um, I I don't know how much of the opportunity he gets here,
Mm-hmm.
but when things are clicking, you know, maybe you find it within the flow. You know what I mean? Like I don't think he's gonna force anything anywhere. That doesn't seem to be his persona. But as long as his teammates are on the same page with him, they can figure it out. Well, yeah, highest paid player. I think you gotta get the grunt of the pressure. You know, even before Brunson, even before Randall,
Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, I do agree he needs to step up and play well.
and play. You know, be available. That
And
you know what I mean. That's another. You know what I mean. Another huge part of it. Part of me.
yeah, that's fine. I just don't know how much we can expect scoring wise because I'm just not sure how many basketballs there is to go around. I just and he's not very aggressive on the offensive end. I think he's somebody that's in the locker room before the game talk about I got to be aggressive. I got to be aggressive. So and so is out today. I got to be aggressive. I don't know if that's a natural part of his game. And with Randall back and Brunson and now Adam
Okay,
Mikal Bridges, I do think he has another level to his game offensively. I'm just not sure it's going to be called on this particular team. We shall see. Um, for me, if he does what he did in the games he played, um, which was you basically knew how he was doing by his plus minus.
hmm
Um, and then if you watch the games, you just saw that he was just all over the place defensively. So I'm not really expecting more from OG Anunoby, despite the huge contract that he signed. I just need him to be what he was
and available.
and available.
Be available more. Like don't like let's change that narrative, change that trend.
Right.
And like I said, and then he can survive. He can get by on his defensive intangibles because like you pointed out, the plus minus, the proof was in the record and things of that, you know what I mean, with him and without him, all that. Like that alone was enough for him to negotiate at the table when it was contract time. Like
Right.
look at the you know what I mean, look at the plus minus, look at the record with me.
Right.
But
Right.
on the flip side,
Look
so
at
I
Philly
get you.
with money. I think he had leverage too because Philadelphia had
That
Philly signed Paul George right at the start
first,
of free agency, he might have had less leverage.
that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, he's my number two. You went through your number one, number two. Who's number three on my list? Uh, I guess I'm gonna go with Randall at number three.
Me
I
too.
got to. I got to.
Me too.
Um, but like I said in the chat, in the Bleacher Report chat, the reason Randall's number three and not number one or number two, because I don't think his pressure actually hits until the playoffs. I think he's, for me at least. I know there's other fans and there's other people out there that are questioning his fit and this and that. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm not worried about him getting off to a rough start. As Tommy Bear pointed out last year, he was off to a historically bad start or worst ever of any player, and we see where he was, prior to his injury. So that in itself shows me, what I mean, like even if it's a slow start, he's gonna figure it out. He's gonna turn it around, and not just last year. That's what he's done since he's been here as a Knick. You know what I mean? Came here first year, wasn't a star. You know what I mean? Was the guy by the end of the season once Mook was gone. Next
Right.
year, figured out how to be the guy. Next year, had to learn how to figure out how to be the guy when the other teams think you're the guy. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, and then figured that out and came back after the thumbs down season. So y'all know what it's been. He figures it out. I'm not worried about that. But it all boils down to the playoffs. Even though I hate when people, use that as the only or as their way to jab at him. My thing is no point in really talking about it too much until we get there. Like, you know what I mean? We know what it's been. We know what it could have been. We know what it should have been if he didn't get hurt. Like, we know all of that. What can you do when you have the opportunity and there's no injuries and there's, you know what I mean? There's no learning curve and everything else. And
Right.
you got guys around you. So
Right.
he's definitely number three on my list, and that's a no brainer. You said you had him at three as well.
I had him at three as well. I agree with your points. I would add that he may put pressure on himself because we talked about in the intro, external pressure, internal pressure. I think that he may put a little pressure on himself to show that he can fit with this team. Um, that he's not here to upset the apple cart. That everyone is saying I can't do it, and they played a certain style without me, but I want to show that I can do it as well. I just hope that if that is his thinking, he doesn't think too much and it takes away from his game because I, for one, feel like they need to fit around him and not necessarily that he needs to fit around them. Those other guys play better playing off of others, and Randall and Brunson are the guys for them to play off of. We saw last year in the playoffs, them just playing off of Brunson by himself wasn't enough. And so hopefully he won't put too much pressure on himself, but I could see a world where he comes in with feeling some internal pressure to fit in. Um, and I don't know, we might have talked about this off the air, just organizational pressure. They haven't signed him to an extension as of yet. Um, and maybe there's some, yeah, maybe he even feels that pressure as well to show the organization that, this team can win at the same clip that you guys won, even though, shout out to Fred Katz, the Knicks actually won less percentage of games without Randall than they did with. But, to show that, our winning percentage is going to be, the same, if not better, with me in the lineup. So there might be some pressure there as far as the organization is,
And,
as-
and
internal pressure, thinking about the organization as well.
shout out to you, but shout out to now I gotta find it. Somebody in the chat said the front office.
Mm,
And they said to get us to go find a center, but I think yeah, like there's pressure there too because the job's not done, right? It's not a finished product. We ain't win nothing yet. even though we getting all the kudos and the glory,
Right.
externally, and it's well deserved. Um, here we go. Dwayne Dennis. I think this is it. He said, I think losing iHeart and not having adequate depth at the five, I believe a lot of pressure is on the ownership falling on Tom Thibodeau to manage this deep team regardless of our second round
Into out of the
into.
tech. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. That's a good point.
that's a
That's a
great
good
point.
point. Even with the lack of depth at the five position, Tom Thibodeau still got to make it happen, or do his part to make it happen. You know.
Yeah, and honestly, that's another reason why I had Tibbs at number one because um not only do we have all the guys that that his type of guys, but I spoke. This is what I spoke about earlier on a previous show. Last year, he was forced to adapt because he had no choice, right? So he had to play some small ball lineup, right, with pressures. He had to sacrifice
Mhm,
some rim protection at times. He had to figure things out and
mhm,
utilize guys that on
mhm.
under normal circumstances history would say he wouldn't have done.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, you mentioned Fred Katz. I believe it was Fred Katz that said this where he said, "You're not gonna believe me, but Tibbs wanted to play 10 guys last year." And again, if that's the case, that's the case. But in my mind, yeah, you gotta figure out how to utilize this roster. You can't go on a 8-man rotation. I don't think you can. I think you gotta utilize 9, maybe 10 at times. You know what I mean? So like, but can he adjust now to? It's easy to make decisions when your choices are limited, but when you give yourself more options, the decision becomes a little bit harder,
Yeah.
and he has a lot more options to run with this year.
I don't really think so. I think our top players, there's the top 7, then you got Deuce, then you got Precious. So when you start talking about going 10, you're talking about like right now, both Deuce and Precious is probably gonna get less than 15 minutes a game. If you bring in a 10th guy, how much time is he gonna get? 8 minutes a game. Because you also have to think about the deeper your roster you go into your roster, the less your best players are on the floor. That's the trade-off. And there's nobody on the back end that's gonna be as good as your front end players.
That is a fact. It's two things. If everything goes great and as planned, those guys are playing because our top guys don't gotta play because the score
Okay, yeah, that's different.
dictates that.
Yeah,
That's different.
I'm
That's optimism. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But
yeah.
um, but even what you're saying, that's 9. That's not, you know what I mean? That's 9 right
I
there.
think he's gonna go
Now,
now.
now we we throw these little monkey wrenches in where we talked about like honorable mention Deuce with the guys he got behind him, but we also got the reports of them seeing Kolik as a point guard, seeing Deuce as a shooting guard. You know what I mean? So if you're adding Deuce in, I mean, if you're adding Kolik in, are you taking Deuce out or does that make 10? So, I mean, it, I don't think it's going to be 10 night in and night out,
Mm-mm.
but I think it has to be some type of mixture throughout the season. You know what I mean? And not because of necessity, not because you have no choice. I think you got to utilize skill sets more. You know what I mean? And that goes for, I'm talking about Tibbs now, but that goes for in game as well. You know what I mean? He's got to figure that out. You might like to use Josh Hart, but you might need DiVincenzo a little bit more that night.
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
know
yeah.
what I mean?
No
Like,
doubt.
so even those type of decisions are gonna, he's gonna have more of those choices this year
Yeah, for sure.
if everything goes right.
I could definitely see that depending on how the game is going. But I don't really see anybody that's not in the rotation who would be better than somebody in the rotation for him to make
No,
a substitution for that for that reason.
I mean you can argue campaign, which we didn't even mention that because
Yeah.
I
If
remember when we first got him,
yeah.
like you was talking about his veteran experience, his you know what I
Listen,
mean, his,
listen.
oh
If it was up
just
to me,
just in front of Deuce, you know what I mean. So even just
yeah,
that logic,
right. You're right. But yeah, you're right. If it was up to me, um, I would go with campaign as the backup point guard because I like his experience and plus he plays the position. However, if he runs Mikal Bridges with that second unit,
mm,
and Mikal Bridges is the one that's handling the ball, generating shots for himself and others, and then Deuce is playing off the ball, then I think that's fine as well. I think that's fine
true,
as well. But
and that's a hell of a defensive
right,
backcourt right there.
yeah, I think. But there's other guys other than the top three that you can argue there's some pressure on them. You know, it may not be like top three pressure, but there's other guys on the team with that who
Go,
has pressure on them.
go ahead and give an honorable mention. I'll give one, and we'll get out of
Yeah,
here.
I'm gonna give my honorable mention to McBride, um, and not for any fault of his own. But I could definitely listen. He's the only one that's coming in, and there's two situational guys in Kolick and Campaign that can come in and take minutes for him, right? I don't think it changes his approach. I think he still does the same thing he does, but I think there's some pressure on him that when I'm out here with this team, whatever this team that I'm out here with, if this team doesn't do well, it may not even be my fault. But but because there's two other potential players that Tibbs can think about, it's possible that he'll say, you know what? Let's see how this runs with Kolick instead of McBride. Let's see how this runs with Cam instead of McBride. When he can't do that with Hart, he can't do that with DiVincenzo. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? He might be able to do it with Precious. He might be able to say, let me see how this second team runs with Sims instead of Precious. But other than the five and the one spot, the two, three, and four, you locked in regardless of how that second team plays. Oh,
Yeah,
that's not true. He could decide I'm not going to run Mikel with the second unit. I'm gonna run OG with the second unit, or I'm gonna run Randall with the second unit.
true,
There's some
true, and
flexibility there as well.
yeah, yeah. But I get what you're saying. Like he got two. The one thing I'll give Deuce credit about, once he got there, he didn't care who was on his tail.
Yeah,
He didn't care if you brought a shake. You know what I mean? He didn't care who was in that, who's on the team. He's like, I made my spot. But I'm just using that in the context because they said they see him more as a shooting guard, which my honorable mention was Brunson at the fourth. I gave the reasons why, but um I can see Precious. It's tough to give Precious or Sims because by necessity they're gonna be utilized, right?
right.
Like we know Mitch ain't playing 82. You know what I mean? I hope he played 66 something like that plus. You know what I mean? But by necessity they need it. But I'll give Precious the nod just because I think he wants to be here, and I think his contract was was made more as a tool to move off of later than it was because he's a long term goal. Like they want to keep him long term. So he might want to prove he's worth keeping and not trading. And I don't know how I mean he got shoes to fill.
Right.
You know what I mean? And Isaiah Hartenstein's role, and I doubt he gets that, but anything you can add as a plus moving forward, you know what I mean? That might make the Knicks look at you different.
Yeah, and
And
he may want to prove that I'm more than adequate behind Mitch. If Mitch goes down, don't even worry about it.
that and
I,
that's
I can step in and handle it. So
and
you know,
that's what I was saying. God forbid it comes to that, but
hmm
it's a tough role because you got to fill the backup role, and you might not have the opportunity to actually fill the role that Isaiah Hartenstein had. You know what I mean? Now, granted, I don't even want to think about him having to be the starter center, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I feel you. Like,
yeah,
but yeah, I think we covered everything. Shout out to the chat. Shout
shout
out
out,
to the replay gang.
definitely
Queen, appreciate you.
appreciate you as well.
Um, see you next week. We should be back on our
Regular spot.
regular scheduled
Well,
time. I know I'm off. I just know I got a barbecue, but I'll make sure I'm home for what we do 12-1.
yeah, the
12 and
barbecue
1.
is later on that day.
No, the barbecue's the day before. But
Oh, if we need to push it back, we could push it back if we
nah,
need.
nah, I'll make it home. It's a 2-day thing, so I'll make sure I enjoy Saturday. I'll come home Sunday. We good for Monday.
Okay.
So yeah, till next week. Back at our regular scheduled time, 12 o'clock on
Sir.
Dope Soul, 1 o'clock on Nicks and Bruises. Shout out to the chat. Your Blackest Time.
Peace.
Queen, you on this Thursday?
This Thursday, 9 o'clock, Just Nicking It Weekly Show, Dope